right now. And today we are looking at the election timelines. Allow me to introduce to you this morning Professor Anyang Nyong'o, who is the governor of Kisumu. Also, we do have with us the governor of Tharaka Nithi. This is His Excellency Muthomi Njuki. Also, we do have with us Dr. Shem, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance. And we do have with us as well Gladys Boss Shollei. She is the women rep, Uasin Gishu County. A very good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Right, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We, of course, are turning our focus on the election timelines. This has been the discussion. Right now, we're given to understand that the IEBC is in Naivasha, of course, on a retreat, trying to thrash out, of course, maybe iron out the wrinkles and kinks that is within that particular commission right now. But looking at the timelines that we do have and what has been given as, of course, the order from the Supreme Court, do we have any time to be politicking the issue? Let's begin with you, Gladys Boss Shollei.
I don't think we have time to be politicking. I think it's about time to focus on what IEBC needs to do in order to run a credible election that is acceptable to all of us as Kenyans. And also for us as Kenyans to participate in assisting IEBC to run the election. And that's why for me the first thing I'll tell the Chairman Chibukati, this is not the time to be writing memos. He should be focusing on what he needs to do to run the election. Because what happens is you have your team demoralized, you're witch hunting each other, and he must, and I must say that when you have a job like this to do, you cannot on the same day as the chairperson of the Electoral Commission immediately announce and say, I shall hold people to account, we shall follow them up, they shall be held criminal. And then the following day, there is a statement from NASA indicating that the following staff members cannot participate in running the election. It's almost, you cannot as chairman today announce the results, be confident that you're happy with the results, go to the Supreme Court and defend those results, and then shortly after that, disown it and disown your staff members. I think what you should be sitting back and saying what went wrong and what do we need to do to correct the situation, but not begin to disown his own staff members. I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. But also, what we should be telling ourselves is that, remember, a lot of the things that we are pointing out that went wrong happened at the field, at the polling stations. We should then ask ourselves, where did it go wrong? Yes, there were times when we said that the rejected, some valid votes were entered as rejected votes. Hence the reason why we saw a huge number of rejected votes, which was thereafter corrected. The question we should ask ourselves is, what went wrong? Let's make sure it doesn't happen the next time that this happens. We must also ensure that, because I think a lot of what is happening is suspicion. There is so much suspicion, nobody trusts the other. So let's open up the tallying center. Let us make sure that political parties deploy their agents correctly and make sure that they have their agents who give them a briefing on exactly what is happening at the polling stations, so that they do not have to complain later and say this went wrong and that went wrong, because we should have known about that right from the beginning. So when the Election Commission is involved in training of agents, the political parties should make sure the agents are there. When they publish the register, every political party has a responsibility to look at the register and raise any issues before the election.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's see from Muthomi Njuki. First of all, because Gladys says this is not a time to be writing memos, but we cannot really gloss over what the issues that were raised in that particular memo, because if they assume that, yes, let's just move on and we're not putting our house in order, are we bound to also experience the same things that happened with these Bangle elections, the presidential elections?
Thank you, Debarl. The issue of elections, of course, is a very, very hot issue at the moment. And I want to tell you that Kenyans are basically fatigued with the issue of elections. Remember, we've been on the trail of a campaign for the last almost 9 months. Now we're getting into another 3 months. And we are getting fatigued as Kenyans. You look at the behavior of the shilling, you look at the importers and the investors. It is time we got rid of these elections and we moved on as Kenyans to do something else. And I'm saying this because the timing of Chebukati to do what he's doing at the moment, the chairman, may be a bit questionable in terms of the wisdom he's using, because there are things that can actually wait. I don't see the reason why, having gone through an election all of a sudden with a team he has worked with, 2 weeks after, or about a week or so after their ruling, and also you look at the time that we finished the elections and now, why is it all of a sudden that he has a problem with the constitution of his team? And I would call this washing dirty linen in public. Mm-hmm. He should actually be able to deal with this internally, not involve the Kenyans in his reshuffling, mm-hmm. and of course ensure that we go through these elections in the best way possible without raising the temperature that it's trying to raise at the moment. If you look at the reaction by the NASA mm-hmm. On their conditions or their terms to go into elections, it gives you an impression that they may not be willing to have elections at the time that has been provided. Because if you decide to take Esra Chiloba and other commissioners to court this week, as it were, it means the attention now the focus will change. And there are, as much as there are people who feel that probably there's a problem inside there, I tend to think that sometimes it's good when you have a team that is watching out for each other, rather than having a team that looks cohesive and can easily connive to maybe ban the elections. Mm-hmm. When they are blaming each other like that, for me, I think it's good in a way, because each one of them will be watching out for each other. Mm-hmm. It's like having a team of thieves, suspects in a mission. Mm-hmm. You cannot probably not be watching what the other team is doing. Even nowadays, when you take auditors to go and audit a very hot thing, maybe in an organization, mm-hmm. sometimes you pick the government auditors and you put them together with the private ones, mm-hmm. so that you can have results that can actually be comparable. I tend to think that we should go through the elections with the commissioners are there. Mm-hmm. There are the issues about having to take some of them to court can be done after elections, because the records are still there. The truth of what happened on August 8th, mm-hmm. to me, is still intact in the ballot boxes. If we want to know what happened on August 8th as Kenyans, we should be able to ask for a recount after these elections have taken place, because I want to believe that the IEBC will not use the same boxes that they used. We will not discard what we have as a record for Kenyans, but we should actually be able to keep that intact, to be able to ask for a recount after this, to be able to know the truth as a post-mortem.
Okay, so here we are torn in between. Is the truth in the ballot boxes, or is the truth also in the servers of the IEBC? Professor Anyang Nyong'o.
I think, morning, Debarl.
Morning to you.
Let me first congratulate my friend Muthomi Njuki for winning the seat of the governorship of Tharaka Nithi. I think I told him last time we met that change would be useful to the people of Tharaka Nithi. And meeting Gladys Shollei for the first time since he was elected.
Thank you.
Congratulations also.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the best in your new role as a legislator. Having said that, I think we do remember that when Chief Justice gave his ruling, he said that election is a process, not an event. And I think he based his ruling on the fact that the process of election, several things had gone wrong under the watch of the IEBC. Okay. And of course, he left it that they're going to give the full text of the ruling within 21 days. So we await that. But in the meantime, it's like if you are a general manager or a managing director of an organization, like a bank, and then suddenly you're told by your auditors that money has been lost. So you sit back and say, who is responsible for this? Because as the boss, you did not know what happened in the audit department, in the procurement department, and so on. So you get this briefing that, look, things have gone wrong under your watch. What do? You don't sit back and say, okay, wait until the next audit, then we shall take action. You take action immediately and make sure that you put round pegs in round holes, not round pegs in square holes. And I think we must sympathize with Chebukati that he was not aware of a lot that was going on. This Supreme Court decision is a wake-up call for him that in order to manage the next election, which is within 60 days, he must do something about those who made mistakes in the election of August 8th. Unless we want to bury our heads in the sand like proverbial ostrich and pretend that nothing went wrong, notwithstanding the High Court decision. So I think we should be very judicious and not make statements that belittle the dilemma that Chebukati is in, and not belittle the fact that the elections coming up on October 17th must be well managed. We must not repeat what happened on the 8th, because this country can only move on if we have a proper presidential election and a president that is legitimately elected with a process that reflects the rule of law and constitutional provisions.
Yes.
And a process that respects our respect for God too. So I do believe that what we need to do is not to dismiss Chebukati off the cuff, but find out from him, okay, the High Court, the Supreme Court said there was a problem. You have identified it. How quickly can you fix it? So I do believe that when they're retreating to Naivasha, maybe these are some of the facts that Chebukati is going to push before them and say, so and so, this was your responsibility, you didn't do it. I can't trust you to do it again unless you want to put this country into a problem. So I would like us to be very circumspect in the statements we make about this. And even the issue that some people have been taken to court, the court is not a guillotine. The court is there to examine what the Supreme Court says and find out, given the disquiet in the IEBC, whether these people are culpable of certain wrongdoings, and hence they cannot be trusted for the job on the 17th of October. Now, the question that Gladys raises, what then is the alternative? I think if these people cannot run the election on the 17th, it doesn't mean there are no other people in this country. There must be other people qualified to run elections. I mean, we have so many people who have run elections elsewhere anyway, who have been observers, who know something about elections. So the next best thing to say, what steps do we take as a nation, as an IBC, to make sure that we have the right combination of people to run the October 17th election? And please, let's not be dogmatic. That's why last time when I was proposing that even it means getting technical assistance, we should get it. Because we have been able to get technical assistance, even in the Treasury, when we were problems. You remember the Dream Team many years ago? There were Kenyans picked up from all over the world to come and run our government for some time, you see. So that's why these bodies are here to help us when we are in a crisis.
All right, thank you. Right, let's hear from Dr. Shem.
Debarl, allow me also to congratulate the two honorables, Mheshimiwa Shollei and Honorable Governor Njuki. Having said that, I think it's important that Kenyans celebrate the modest achievements that we have had over the years in terms of election management. I recall those years, the 80s and so on, when people would go to queue to be elected. So there are significant gains that have been made, and I think the recent Supreme Court ruling was just an icing on the cake. Obviously, we still have some way to go, but I think we are getting pretty close. I would make a passionate appeal to the Supreme Court that the full judgment really needs to be released soonest. I'm hoping that we get it out this week, because currently what people are saying, most of it is speculative, if you ask me, because nobody really has gone deep down to know what is it that led the Supreme Court to this decision. I think there are facts that it's only them that can reveal, and the sooner that's done, the better. Having said that, I think we must also compliment what the IEBC is doing by retreating. I remember in the days when we were trying to craft NAC together, some South African leaders did tell us, you know, you go to what they call the bundus. You go out for a retreat. It helps to gel and to bond. And I think this is not a time that we want to drive wedges between the commissioners and either the commissioner among themselves or the commissioners and the secretariat, because it's not in the interest of anyone. We want to see harmony in the commission. There's what we call collective responsibility. Of course, that's not to say that people were culpable, because somebody or some people must have been responsible for the serious, the horrendous mistakes that must have been committed that led the Supreme Court to this determination. So obviously some people must bear their crosses. But for now, I think we don't know whether it's Chebukati who bears the maximum responsibility, or Chiloba, or the commissioners, or some other person. I think for now it's all speculative. And my request is until we get to know what exactly the court did find, let's assume everybody is innocent at the commission, and let them work together as they prepare for the next election, for the repeat election.
All right, Gladys, at this moment, we know, I just wanted to ask you, first of all, do you think this retreat that they're having right now is sort of a reconciliatory retreat, or a retreat also to map out where we're headed to when it comes to the general election or the October the 17th? Because first of all, how can they also be, if the latter is the truth, that they are seeking to map out the general election, what guiding mantra are they using without the full judgment from the Supreme Court?
Okay, I think I'd like to put first this into perspective, Debarl. One, the Supreme Court did not establish any criminality on the part of any of the officers at IEBC. I think we must put that correctly. Number two, as Honorable Ochuodho said, we don't have the full judgment. In fact, the majority judgment, we didn't even get a summary of the reasons. So we do not know yet what they said. Yes. So in fact, for someone to quickly say so-and-so is a criminal and so-and-so is a criminal based on the Supreme Court judgment, that hasn't come out yet. We're yet to find out what the Supreme Court has to say about it. Also, I believe IEBC, if they are truly at the retreat now, then I think the time now, I'm not sure, I don't know what they're doing there, but what they should be focusing on is on the systems, not personalities. Whether you remove Cheloba or remove whoever, it does not matter. If the system is the same one, the same problems will occur. So we should focus on improving the systems. Who runs it is not an issue at all. And remember, the errors that that were pointed out, have been pointed out by various parties, happened at the polling station, or at the transposition of the results from one form to another at the field, not at headquarters. The headquarters changed nothing. Once they came to Bomas on the presidential results, nothing was changed, because there was a court decision that said the results from the polling stations electronically transmitted shall be final. We can then not say again in our arguments at the Supreme Court that, oh no, the results should not have been announced until the hard copies arrived, because we stopped that. That used to happen in the past. So it just leaves us with saying, it does not matter what we say now. It does not matter how we look at the Supreme Court decision. The point is, we have to have an election. And we have to have an election that people will trust and accept. Because like a governor here from Tharaka Nithi says, Kenyans need to move on, we are tired. So let's make sure that we have the elections. I know I've seen in the media there that NASA has complained that they don't trust the observers, they don't like some observers. There is in the timeline, it shows clearly that there will be a time to pick observers. Let them say we don't want the following people to be observers. We participate in it and change it. But also, all said and done, this, and I think you will find out soon enough that this was the best run election in Kenya's history. We have had, this time, even the transmission of the results was 45% transmission. Electronic. This time we did at 75. It was a well-run election. All right, but we were able to correct many of the problems that we used to have.
Thank you. Right, we'll take a short break, but of course you raise also a very important issue. We want to find out that it's not about the systems
the personalities.
It's the personalities. You say the system is okay, or the system is bad.
I'm saying it's not about the personalities, it's about the systems that we use.
It's about the system, but the people will say it's not about the system, it's about the personality who are running the system. This is a bone of contention as well. Right? We take a short break, Professor. When we come back, we'll circle back with you. Okay. Right, let's move on and of course take a short break. On the other side of a break, of course, we'll circle circle back with the professor to answer that. Is this the system or the personnel that are running the system as well? Don't go away. Much more coming up on the other side of a break. We'll continue with this discussion. Of course, also drilling deeper and looking at the election timelines, where also we'll get a presentation from Gladys Boss Shollei. Don't go away. The Electoral Commission, suffering a credibility crisis and under intense public scrutiny and internal wrangles, is seeking to redeem itself by purposing to do things differently to deliver a credible presidential election next month. The Commission Chairman, Mr. Chebukati, has now released a timetable showing what will be done when, as he and his team prepare to oversee the election as directed by the Supreme Court. In the ruling that nullified President Uhuru Kenyatta's re-election, the court found out that those who conducted the August 8th general elections were culpable for acts of omission and commission, illegalities and irregularities, meaning that they are unsuitable for a repeat assignment. Recruiting a whole set of electoral officials is an urgent imperative, and given the time constraints, it must be done expeditiously and, of course, competently. In the same breath, the recruitment must be transparent and credible, and only suitable candidates should be picked. Evidence now emerging from an audit of the annual election shows gross failures by presiding and returning officers, with some blunders too serious and to the point of being liable for criminal prosecution. Questions still abound as to whether IEBC will get it right this time. While appreciating the Commission is pressed for time, the public will be satisfied if and only if the Commission proves to be beyond reproach and must demonstrate that it has taken all possible steps to safeguard the credibility of the outcome. The next 3 weeks are critical because they will determine the level of confidence that the Commission will earn as it prepares to handle the election. One of the things that the leadership of the Commission needs to do is to clean up its house and put in place systems that will inspire confidence in both the citizens as well as the contestants. This is not an easy job, and Kenyans will be watching. And I'm holding court this morning with Professor Anyang Nyong'o, who is a governor of Kisumu. Also, we do have with us Muthomi Njuki, the governor of Tharaka Nithi. We do have with us Farah Maalim, the former deputy speaker of the 10th National Assembly. Also, we do have with us Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who is a global leader of Kenya Diaspora Alliance, as well as Gladys Boss Shollei, who is a women rep, Uasin Gishu County. Professor, we had promised when we circle back, we'll continue with you, of course, looking at what we were talking about.
Yeah. Yes, I was just following up. You know, Gladys, of course, is an authority on IEBC, so sometimes it's difficult to contradict that. But on this issue, I would like us to look at what Dominic Burbridge has written in today's Business Daily.
That's on page...
the article was page 3.
Page 3 of the Business Daily.
Yeah, the article is called "Is Supreme Court Deadline for Fresh Poll Within Reach?" ?
Yes.
And now I'll just quote from the last paragraph from the first column. Even once the full judgment is handed down within 21 days of the ruling, it probably won't indicate criminality at the level of individuals. That's what Gladys was saying. The Supreme Court was asked only to determine the validity of the election overall. Its full judgment can indicate how the process of the election must be improved. Okay? The election was judged to be void because the Electoral Commission was at fault. This suggests it must change its procedures and perhaps its personnel. You know, the two things are connected. You cannot divorce the process from the personnel. That's what you are saying,
yes,
Debarl.
Yes.
If better elections are to take place, a new election must avoid the errors of the previous one. A new election must avoid the errors of the previous one. So we must deal with the process and the personnel at the same time, because it's the people who make mistakes, notwithstanding the perfection of a process.
Yes.
And then further down in the last paragraph, it says, the Supreme Court has ruled that both the IEBC as a whole and its chairperson, Wafula Chebukati, are responsible for the failure on August 8th. The IEBC should petition the Supreme Court to give it more time. Section 86 of the Constitution requires the IEBC to collate the results of an election openly and accurately. At present, it can't meet this requirement because it does not know what it must do differently from before. The IEBC should depend on Section 86 to ask the Supreme Court for more time. Let me just add another data. When we were on election day in Kisumu, we found that at least 600 people from 3 polling stations Sports Ground, Lion School, and Migosi did not have their names on the register. You saw the story just before we started. Individuals from all over Kenya said they turned up, they could find their names. In Kisumu, we actually wrote down 600 people, we have them. In 3 polling stations, who could not find their names in the register. This is tremendous disenfranchisement. And this tells a lot about the process, because something went wrong with the register. And I can associate with something which has been going on. Even yesterday I was dealing with it. Yes. People buying others' IDs. Even churches asking people to surrender their IDs. I think churches have become extremely criminal, by the way, in this respect. So there are so many things about the process we need to deal with, if indeed we are going to have an election that is respectable. And I don't think we should be dogmatic about it, either party-wise or individual-wise and so on. Let us look facts squarely, agnostically, and do the right thing, as indeed Dominic Burbridge says in this article.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Muthomi Njuki.
Allow me just briefly, very briefly, to comment on the issue of the ruling of the Supreme Court. And I want to note that the Supreme Court did give directive that the elections should be carried out again by the same IEBC that had actually carried out the other elections. If there was a serious omission or a serious commission on the part, because there are two things here. The reason why they gave the judgment is because definitely we had errors. But there are two types of errors. There can be error of omission or the error of commission. If in their wisdom they realized that the IEBC had committed errors intentionally that jeopardize the elections, then they should not have given directive for this body to carry out the elections again. And I want to believe that there are errors of omission, and the fact that we have not been given the ruling in details does not mean that the Supreme Court judges do not know what exactly are the errors. And if they are that grave, to the extent that it would have been jeopardized the next election, then it would not have allowed this body to carry out the elections again. I would urge Kenyans, and the politicians especially, to allow the IEBC to complete what is ahead of them so that we can go back to normalcy in Kenya. Forget about the issue of the system versus personalities, because if you look at the history of elections in this country, we have changed personalities for over almost 2 decades. Kivuito was there. He was a personality. There were systems, he went. Eze Hassan was there the other day. We actually banned him out of the office from the demands from the opposition. He was a personality, systems were there, he went. Now we thought we had an angel in the name of Chebukati. Apparently, there are serious, even more serious problems. So it is time we agreed that we can never have 100% perfect elections and deal with the marginal errors and move on. Because if you're looking for that 100% perfection, then that can only be found in heaven and not in this world, and not especially in Kenya. The question is, do the errors that were committed enough to have nullified the elections? Is it possible for us to admit that we cannot have 100% and allow IEBC to conduct the election the way they are, and we move on? That is a big question.
That is a big question. Right, let's hear from Dr. Shem, then we'll come to Gladys.
Debarl, I was looking at the Dominic article in the Business Daily, and also cross-checking with the Constitution, where the Supreme Court would have the power to change the election date from 60 days. I think I've failed to see any provision in the Constitution that would allow that to happen. So, with due respect to Dominic, that seems to me like it's wishful thinking. Obviously, would have loved to have a little more time. But
have you read the entire article in its...
Yes, I've browsed through.
Right?
You know, there's some of those people who read across articles diagonally. The Ford family members used to do that. I've gone through, but he's talking about Article 86. He doesn't give the Supreme Court that authority. But having said that, I must reiterate the point that what currently the Commission is trying to do to put its house in order is the right way to go. I think there are no two ways. But I also take cognizance of the IEBC Act. Even though the Commission is independent, the law, I forget the particular article of the Act, says that although they are independent, they must consult. There is the public participation, and they must also consult the stakeholders. And I think at this time, I see only strength if the various parties said we need to relook at the date. As long as the date is within those 60 days, I think it's still possible. Jubilee and NASA, and I'm glad that both Jubilee and NASA leaderships have said we're prepared to dialogue on this with the IEBC. So building consensus, I know some people have said, oh no, IEBC is independent, don't interfere, the dates that it gives are the dates we have to work with. But again, the same IEBC Act says they need public participation as long as it's within the framework of the law. And finally, I wanted also just to say, having been privileged to head organizations, corporations, both within Kenya and outside, I still find it a bit uncomfortable. How did the Chebukati memo to Chiloba leak out? It means there is a loophole somewhere. And actually, the same IEBC Act also specifies very strongly, every officer of the IEBC signs a confidentiality requirement that binds them. And there are electoral offenses that people are culpable for. I also know that the same IEBC Act says that an individual cannot be charged for criminality if whatever they did was in good faith. So obviously one would have to establish, was this done in good faith or not? But this is why I must repeat the call upon the Supreme Court. I think Parliament should reduce the 21 days. I don't see why the Supreme Court needs 21 days, with due respect, to come up with the full judgment. Maybe it should be 14 days in future, so that we don't keep, particularly if you have to stay with the 60 days to hold the elections from the time they make the pronouncement. So to that extent, I'm hoping the Supreme Court will hear the prayers of Kenyans. I think IEBC chair has himself, or IEBC, the commission has written the Supreme Court requesting for expediting that full judgment, upon which action can be taken. But fortunately, the two can go side by side, even as people who are culpable are being investigated, because investigation must be done and prosecuted. The arrangements for the plans for the elections should also go hand in hand in earnest.
Let's drop in Farah Maalim, as also Gladys Boss Shollei. You prepare also to make a presentation for us. Good morning, sir, and thank you for coming through.
Yeah, thank you. You see, if we lose sight of the objective of having, or the spirit and the object of having an IEBC, is to hold a credible presidential election. Everything else is auxiliary. Some of them cast in law, for example, the 60 days, for example, the role of they're there. But the important thing, the thing that essentially is the centerpiece, is to hold a credible, transparent, verifiable presidential election.
Yes.
Among many other elections. Now, if within the time limit we have right now, or the time frame we have right now, we are not able to achieve that, which I don't think we'll be able to achieve, in my opinion, by the way, because when there's this very damning judgment by the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court says IEBC, I think they're talking about IEBC as an institution, not IEBC as currently constituted, that these ones must go ahead and do it. So there is need to deal with the institution itself, and first of all, clean up the mess in the institution. If the mess in the institution cannot be cleaned up, then what's the point? You go back again with the same infrastructure when it comes to the ICT, and then the same personnel who are responsible for these things, and you expect a credible election to take place? No. I think we're in a constitutional crisis. And when you have a crisis like this, it's important for people to sit back and meditate, reflect a bit, and see how we can come together one more time, the way we have come together before. Personally, whether we're going to go, I don't think the Supreme Court, under Section 86, as he puts it, I don't see it having an express, or the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has got an express, a role and jurisdiction to carry out these functions. I don't think they will be in a position to carry out these functions within the time frame we have right now. And the functions are these. At the Independent Electoral Commission, whatever voting method is used, the system is simple, accurate, verifiable, secure, accountable, and transparent. The votes cast are counted, tabulated, and results announced promptly by the presiding officers at each polling station. The results for the polling stations are openly and accurately collected and promptly announced by the returning officer. We never had that last time. Appropriate structures and mechanisms to eliminate electoral malpractices are put in place, including the safekeeping of election materials. You see, all these things is what they're supposed to achieve. They are not able to achieve under the time frame right now, and the structure that they have, which in itself is suspect. The court has said that there are malpractices, which are done by IEBC officials.
Okay.
So for them to be able, I think Parliament has got to come back together. The presidential contenders have got to come back together, and they have to say, hey, let's see how we can. Because one other option is for NASA, for example, to say, no, under these structures, we are not going to go for elections. Now, if you have 60% or 50% of the population of this country boycotting elections, then there's no credibility in that election itself. So in my opinion, I think there's need for there to be, instead of the grandstanding and all these campaigns that people have put, if I were Jubilee, yeah, I would still go ahead and I expect this thing to be done within a month. Because then the system that was vilified, that the Supreme Court found to be suspect, is still in place. The officials who rigged me in are still in place, for lack of a better word, because I think you've been rigged in. So I'm talking about you, Muthomi. You got you as very well fair. But I'm talking about the national elections.
Thank you.
But then NASA would not accept this. This is what I want to tell you. So it's important that we go back. This constitution is not cast in stone. We had an accord, which was a statute, which had a simple majority, that we decided was going to be superior to the constitution, the national accord. Because it said any provisions of this accord, of the constitution, which is inconsistent with this accord, is voided to the extent of that inconsistency. And that was just a piece of legislation. So what we need to do for us to be able to save our country, we have already achieved one milestone. We have achieved a very powerfully independent, what they call a Supreme Court, that essentially is the talk of the world, including the first world countries. Let's go the step ahead and make sure that this election is done in the right way, regardless of how much time we're going to use again. How much we sit back and come together.
Thank you.
And negotiate.
Can I just add a
you.
footnote before we go to Gladys? I think I agree with Shem when he says that on the basis of Article 86,
Article 86
of the Constitution,
yes,
it does not give the IEBC any ground to petition. But I think what Dominic meant is that the provisions of Article 86 and the time given gives the IEBC ground to petition the Supreme Court. Now, what we need to do is look at rules or provisions regulating petitions to the Supreme Court. I've been looking at the Constitution. I can't find them, but maybe Gladys, who's a lawyer, could say, under what conditions would somebody like the IEBC petition the Supreme Court, or any other court for that matter? Because in the Senate, we know how people petition us. There are provisions for petitioning Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate. I'm not quite sure how the Supreme Court would, on these grounds, for example, Farah says, do they have time to ensure that appropriate structures and mechanisms to eliminate electoral practices are put in place, including the safekeeping of elections? Do they have time for all these things, and guarantee that we are not going to have a botched presidential election? I think these are the things that we should look at very agnostically, by the way, and not say that things must be done within 60 days, even if they're going to go wrong.
Yeah.
That's the decision we have to make.
And then you say you're prone to always go
yes,
for.
then we're in this
you're prone for again
vicious cycle. Yes.
Vicious cycle,
again.
because you see,
Debarl, I think it's vital, the Article 140.
Yeah.
Because that's really what specifies.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's not a carte blanche that even the Supreme Court can just do what it likes. I feel a bit uncomfortable when we seem to say the Constitution is not all. I think the fidelity that we have, the only compass we have is the Constitution as it is now. Okay. So unless and until it's changed, Article 140 gives, there would have been a little play if Supreme Court delayed its determination. But the law says in Article 143, if the Supreme Court determines election to be invalid, a fresh election shall be held within 60 days. Yeah. So to that extent, even the Supreme Court doesn't have a power to change.
Yeah, okay.
Now, but the same also applies 142. If the court were able to delay the determination, But then even that has got to be done within 14 days of filing. Right. So that 140 ties our hands. So in as much as Dominic may want us to look at that, but even the Supreme Court's hands are tied, unless we change this.
Unless we change this. Okay, Gladys, over to you now. We are strapped for time. And the IEBC was, of course, picking the 17th of October as now the date for elections. Were they really also not considering a raft of issues, putting the house in order as well, and also the timelines that they've presented with us, the timetable itself?
I would trust that the Electoral Commission knows what they're doing, because usually as an election manager, I've been there before, you pick the date of the election, then work backwards and see if you need 20 days or 30 days, that's how you decide the election date. And you know exactly how many days each of the activities require. And as you can see in the timelines that you've presented there, they will tell you this will take a day, this will take 2 days. So I think they are perfectly within the time. And as we go through this election timeline, I think I'll use the opportunity to convince my friend and someone I held with high esteem, Professor Anyang, on this one. Right now, I'm telling myself, yes, we have to run the election. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we working with? This is the number of days we have. Within this number of days, what can we do? All of us as patriotic Kenyans are people who love our country and who want to have an election. What do we need to do? And I think if you look at the timelines, we have an opportunity at every spot to be able to work with it. If you look at the first activity, when they talk about having the policy framework in place, we can participate as political parties. And in fact, I would suggest that NASA provides a team, let Jubilee provide a team, who will sit together be the liaison team with IEBC. So that when they're working on any policy framework, we make sure that everybody's interest is taken care of and there is nothing for anyone to fear. The register of voters is also something that is in the timelines. If you look at it, point 2 of the timelines. Again, when the register of voters is put out, again, and I think I'm happy about what you're saying, that you discovered there were 600 people missing from the register. Now that we know that, I hope you have taken the 600 names to IEBC. No, we need to take them to IEBC now, so to make sure that these people are put back on the register if they were missing. So even us as Kenyans, we have a responsibility as voters. And as political parties, let's help IEBC to deliver this. So let's go through the register. And that's why we kept on saying, people must be asked to check their names on the register during the time of verification. If you go the planning meetings, IEBC will have various planning meetings, etc. Let's make sure that even us as political parties, and right now it's just two teams, we can make sure that we attend the planning meetings, or at least we get briefings of what IEBC is planning. Because if IEBC wants people not to be suspicious of them, let them be transparent. We learned those lessons in 2010, and I think you know. Yeah, Honorable Maalim knows that. I think Professor knows that. We used to call political parties to IEBC and say, this is what we are doing. This is how we plan to do it. This is where we have challenges, and this is where we can fix it, and this is where we can't fix it. So that even as we go to the election, you know that we have that challenge ahead of us. Then it doesn't become an issue for us to petition against the results. We can be able to discuss and find a middle ground. We go to the next one about voter education and observation. One of the things IEBC has to do now in its timelines is to appoint accredited observers. Again, this is our opportunity, and I had it there. If NASA has a problem with some observers, just let IEBC know. They don't have to be accredited. You know, we're not saying we're letting them choose whom they want, but at least if that is going to cause this country more delays in having an election, let's do it. And and then also there's going to be the recruitment and training and deployment of returning officers. Again, we said the mistakes that people have raised happened in the field, not at headquarters. So here we are losing focus here. It was the presiding officers. And remember, the presiding officers are not permanent officials of IEBC. It's only the returning officers who are. So what we should do is, again, let's publish the list of all the people who are being appointed as presiding officers and as returning officers. If you have a problem in Kisumu, Professor Young, say we'll have an opportunity. I think that is the way we should go forward as a country. And say, I don't like the following persons, I don't think they should be put in as presiding officers.
That did not work this time around. It
didn't work.
No, but I'm saying now that we are in...
This time around, you see, you're right. You're saying headquarters is not the problem is the ground. The headquarters sent in specific returning officers with specific instructions. to go and bring so-and-so, deliver so-and-so. And that person works directly. Even the last time, you did a very good job at the headquarters. But then what did you do? What happened is that then you allowed members of who are running for these different seats to literally bring their people as election officials on the ground.
Then this is how we can counter it. Because again, like we said, elections is a process. It's not about just one group of people. So if we think we have a problem here, we can find a way of countering it. For example, we must make sure now as political parties that you have your agents deployed to the ground, to every polling station, properly trained, and try and make sure that they are able to report to you at every stage.
It never worked this time. With the security
We have to
machinery,
try.
with the election officials, with everybody, they kick them out, they beat the hell out of them, and they remain alone, one side, and then they just manufacture
I
all
always
the
believe,
disaster.
I'm an optimist,
That's
I always
what
believe we can try and fix a system if we talk about
You
it.
see the system, the same fixers of the system are the ones who are messing the system. So there's no way you can fix it.
And then, and just let me say lastly on this one, even the printing of ballot papers.
Let me just say something about returning officers, privatizing officers. So long as you allow the National Intelligence Service to interfere with IEBC work, we'll never get the returning officer, providing officer equation correct. What Farah is saying is very true. We had a big problem with returning officer in Moroni, who could not listen to anybody. The only people who should listen were the police.
Okay, but suppose, what solution do you want? Change that returning officer?
No, what I'm saying, it's not so much individuals. I think this is why we come to the process.
The system.
The process of identifying, placing, and safeguarding
deploying.
the interests of the voters. Okay, it's the interest of voters which is important. So that the returning officers, you can get a returning officer in Mombasa to go and be a returning officer in Kisumu. So that he has no relationship whatsoever with local politics.
And they said that is too expensive, because we had said get all the officials for Garissa, for example, county, from Wajir. And the ones for Wajir, take them from Garissa and Mandera, shuffle them like that. And they said we don't have the money. We're only paying what they call the election officials, 1,000 or 2,000 shillings a day, just for that day. And that's when you find somebody who's earning 300,000 goes there as an election official. Why would he go? Because he doesn't want the 1,000 shillings. He goes there because he has a mission. And then they went and recruited for whoever they had as a favored or favorite, what they call candidates, all his officials there. Frustrated the process in the strongholds of the opponent, and literally had a field day.
With a lot of respect, I don't want to agree on the issue that only one person can make a difference in a polling station. All of us know that when you get to the polling station, you put your fingerprint, and it picks up your details and your photograph. And then it ticks you off the list, and then you're able to get the ballot paper. The agents for each of the political parties.
In court.
Just a moment, Farah.
Gladys, I don't want to tell you what happened there.
So are you saying we're not capable of having an election?
All right. I want us to just focus on the timelines a bit. Let's not go on to see what was happening in the polling station.
Yes.
But before you go on, Muthomi, you had something to say, just briefly?
This issue of friends as returning officers, or people I don't like as returning officers, you will never get your friends all over Kenya to be returning officers. That is why in a polling station we have a big battalion of officials, including the agents for every candidate.
And they can't all collude. It's an impossibility.
It's not possible for us to have all of them colluding. And that is why they're there. So as long as these presiding officers and ROs are Kenyans, let them get an opportunity to serve. It doesn't matter whether you like them or not. The idea is, do they follow the law and what has been put in place?
What we should be interrogating is the system that they are using.
A system is there, and listen, I'll just give you one example. You have somebody who's supposed to check on the fingerprints at the KIMS. Yes. But you have somebody who knows basically what to do. It's a stronghold of somebody they want. They do this, they move. For you to say that so-and-so has voted, there must be a validation there. Supposing a validation is not done.
But let me ask a
question.
How
many times can that person come back, if I may ask you?
Then that should be evidence that the agents have. Because I hear about all this.
The agents are there. The agents are there.
All right, thank you.
So that means you didn't train your agents properly and they're not vigilant.
The agents are not supposed to come to where that thing is there. The agents are far.
Thank you. We don't live in another continent, Mars. We live in Kenya. The point that the NASA colleagues are saying is factual. It's factual because Professor also said it. Particularly if you come from strongholds, if you come from Nyanza, if you come from Central, it's not unusual to expect that all the agents, all the returning officer, as expected, all the observers would do duty and fairness, justice to what's expected of them. So that this happens, I mean, in certain places it's true. You find either agents are compromised, returning officers, presiding officers, and other election officials compromised, or even outright kicked out. But what would be more useful is, were there reports, were there complaints that are filed so that action is taken along such? Also, I would make an appeal to the election observers that perhaps rather than spreading out thin everywhere in the country, there are particular trouble spots. Yeah. And in this particular case, we know where the trouble spots are. Why don't they concentrate in those areas so that, of course, I also know they can't go to literally every polling center, but they can go to good samples enough so that if there's irregularities, it's not just what one may call hearsay, but there's evidence. Also, in as much as the Supreme Court did invalidate the elections, I don't think the Supreme Court said somebody was rigged in. Because we really don't know. The truth is we don't know who won, we don't know who lost. By invalidating the election, it's not that one party lost who was declared won, who was declared winner. And lastly, I wanted to disagree a little bit with my sister in terms of systems versus people. In fact, systems include the people. As of now, and I wouldn't really say that the problem is at the ground rather than the headquarters, because that information is still not available with us. If information is being relayed from the ground to the tallying center, this interference could have happened at any point. It could have happened at the point of entry, being typed at the polling center. It could have been doctored as it was traveling, transiting. It could be at the end of reception. For now, the truth is we don't know until the Supreme Court gives us that full judgment.
All right. And until a full audit is done. And also just remember that the point I was trying to make when I talk about systems versus people here, I'm saying even if you get rid of Ezra Chiloba or Immaculate Kasait or whoever within the headquarters, that doesn't help you in the 40,000 polling stations where you're saying you have a problem. That doesn't help you. So I think the issue we should be asking ourselves, we have kept on changing commissioners. We have, as Governor Muthomi here said, but nothing changes. So we should be asking ourselves, we should counter it. And it is possible to counter it. I don't believe, I'm not that pessimistic to say that there is nothing we can do, it will be stolen anyway. No. I remember myself, personally, I had that when during the Jubilee nominations, I was a little worried about the process. What I did is I deployed agents. I had an agent down the road who counted how many people walked into the polling station, did a head count for me. And I said, I want to know how many people walked into the polling stations, how many walked out. And then after that, I had the agent inside who counted how many people have also collected their ballot papers and actually put them in. Then, based on those reports, I knew I was preparing myself in case I had a problem. So even this, I'm asking NASA, stop complaining. Try and also put in systems to try and counter any problem that might arise. Because we can't be sitting and saying they'll steal anyway, the NIS is involved, because I think that is almost like you've given up, you know, on this country. Then don't participate in the election.
You're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Look, please.
What about when you have a commissioner who is compromised?
No. Let me just tell you.
You can deal with it and you can raise it.
Gladys.
We've raised it.
Gladys, we are talking about the process and the personnel. And the point I'm making is based in concrete evidence. I was in Kisumu when it was reported, and in Kisumu East constituency, the returning officer had disappeared. So nothing was going on at the county center. We had to go there, call the returning officer, the county returning officer, to come Kisumu East and solve the problem, because nobody had the powers to let anything go on without the county returning. He did come. That was after a lot of time had passed. And he did find that deputy returning officer to take over because he had the powers to do that. While we were there, we are told that the returning officer in Moroni constituency has refused our agents to enter the counting hall. We had then to finish this one, drive to Moroni, start the whole for 5 hours. We found that our agents were outside. The police were standing at the door. They couldn't allow them in. So these are part of the process and the personnel that we must solve ahead of time.
And that process...
Look, just be patient. At the headquarters, are they deliberating in Naivasha? They should ask themselves, one, what is the role of the police in safeguarding elections? Secondly, at what point should a returning officer or even a presiding officer enjoy the powers of excluding agents from entering a polling station? Okay? Now, it happens so frequently that this must be resolved prior to the election being held. And if the IEBC is in the habit of hiring returning officers or presiding officers who feel that when they go to the station, they completely forget election laws and they implement their own laws by excluding agents, even if you have it. For example, our agents in Moroni were very senior people. One of them had been a minister in the county government, and they were excluded by the police, physically.
Okay, let me explain
just 1
this.
minute.
Okay, then we need to give Gladys the time also to give us the
With
presentation
all
of
due
timeless.
respect to my fellow governor, my brother, Anyang Nyong'o, the role of the police in a police station is not to be able to identify agents and be able to let them, even at the polling station, not to identify the agents at the polling station. Their is to keep order, to ensure that we don't have any fracas.
And they didn't.
And that is why we do have a requirement by IEBC that you must have not only the introduction letter, you must also have the oath that has been taken by the agents to actually be able to be in the database of those agents that are allowed in by IEBC. Even in Tharaka Nithi County, we had our agents locked out who did not have proper papers to be able to enter.
My brother.
It does not mean that if somebody is very famous and is known to be a former member of parliament or is a known personality
I think, Debarl, we
in the
need to
village.
bring back this conversation.
Let
me ask you.
Let it finish.
I want to
Just
by
finish.
saying that IEBC did a very good job
Yes.
in making sure that we reshuffle the ROs all over the country. In Tharaka Nithi County, a very good gentleman by the name of Bonyo.
Governor, let me request you something.
Job.
Thank you.
In ensuring that we had elections carried out in the peaceful manner, in the right manner.
Thank you. But you know that now is history.
Yes, and I
let's
think
see when we're moving forward. Yeah, you continue.
Okay, let's put this way. I think this show.
Just a moment.
Please, not that these people did not have papers. They had the papers. They were bona fide agents. And I had to travel there to go and learn.
Prof.
No,
Okay, we are getting exactly.
Just a moment.
No. There were separate rules of engagement.
But let's put this back.
Let's, and for the rest of us, because
Okay.
really,
Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
I think Debarl knows. I have declined to come on any talk show because I say I don't like talking about problems or whining and complaining.
We are not whining.
I want us to say this is the problem. We've made the complaint. The complaint is known, and the complaint. But the complaint has gone as far as the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Please don't use those words. We are not whining. We are taking problems.
But I'm saying today is not the day for that because we are past that.
All right, thank you. Okay, Gladys. All right, Prof.
We are not whining.
We should be telling ourselves this has happened.
Yes.
What are the solutions we should put
But
in
we
place?
have to know what the problems
and we have
are.
that. We know the problems already. They
That's
were
what we are
presented
stating.
before the Supreme Court.
All right,
I
thank
think
you.
those problems have
Prof,
already been discussed.
can we just give Gladys her head
but
right
please,
now to
please,
tell us
please.
now
Those
when?
problems have been discussed. I'm sorry about that.
Be simple about that. We are not whining. We can't be whining here.
All right, thank you.
We are complaining about something that happened.
We're stating the problems.
Okay, now we know the problems.
Okay, these are
We've
just
stated the
semantics.
problems.
All right, thank you. Gladys.
I'm sorry about that, Professor.
She can't assume that's
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Professor.
Prof, yeah.
No, I'm sorry, Professor.
Yeah, she's apologized. Prof. Okay, Gladys. Continue, because I'm interested to know also, because I don't know where we left it at. We were at the point of...
now we get to the next stage, which is the training of agents, and that's why we've said this is where the agents help us. We have to train our agents, we have to make them extra vigilant, we have to let them know. Because we already anticipate, the way you've stated the fact that these are the challenges that existed. Now knowing that those challenges exist, during the training of the agents, we have to make sure that our agents understand this. We remember that even the police officers, we have to make sure they are informed not to block agents out of the station. And by the way, Professor, you're not the only one who had that challenge. I also had to go many times to various polling stations where I was called and told our agents have been refused to get in. And I would go there and make sure they get in.
What is the rhyme or reason?
We shouldn't be
preventing
doing that.
the agents.
I think what I realize is that when you run an election, you hire so many people, and there are some people who just have bad personalities. Haven't you gone to a building and the askari refuses to let you in? So it's personalities. So if you manage people, we have that challenge.
So it's not politically instigated at all?
I had that challenge. I had exactly what he's describing. I had the same problem in Tarbo constituency. I had to go there myself.
Just give her a head fast.
I had exactly the same problem. They wouldn't let the agents in, the police were. In fact, at some point, I told a police officer, don't touch anyone. and stop behaving like that, I had to intervene.
All
so
right.
it does happen. It's not unique to one place. We have that challenge all over the country.
All right.
But it shouldn't be there in the first
It should not be there, but you will find them.
Part of the wrong
Okay. Can you just give Gladys
And that's why we
her
should
head
work
to...
on minimizing
have
that
her-
issue.
Let Gladys have her head to complete the timelines so that we can actually get to discuss these things, Prof.
And that's why if we have that joint team, we are able to say, these are the requirements, the police are informed, they cannot stop agents, they cannot do this. If we talk about it now and send out the instructions now and say it loud and clear, as both Jubilee and NASA, it will not happen. Fantastic. We have to try. We can't give up until one day we'll have a perfect system and people who are better behaved when we are in elections. And after the training of the agents, there is a procurement and distribution of election materials.
All right.
Again, here...
Before we go to the procurement, because I can see, I want to refer you to this 5, and I think it's there on the screen. Voter education and observation. And we have accreditation of VE providers. Then we have accreditation of domestic and international observers. And this also has been a bone of contention from, of course, NASA as well. And we saw the way they went and they were jumping the gun and declaring, you know, that it was fair and credible, without even also making sure that the transmission itself was complete. So was this an early judgment call, so to speak, from the observers? And if they're here, of course, in the timelines, it's not stipulated in the Constitution anyway that we should have observers, isn't it?
No, but observers are actually part of the election process.
The election
part
process.
of the process. And then what should happen, and we see most observers give their reports at intervals. Some may give a report in terms of saying the election operation has begun well, polling stations opened well. They can give that statement. Later they can give a statement that in their view, and that's why you should have as many observers as possible, because that way you can, even if one has a different opinion, you will hear the other saying something different. Because that's why you don't have only one group. We have both the local ones who know the ground maybe more specifically. So I think the more observers we have, the better.
Thank you.
And I think people should nominate more observers.
Can I ask a question?
To be able to
Debarl?
Yes.
These timelines we are discussing, you know, it came out at a time when there was discord in IEBC. Do we assume it's the official one? My second question is that as the team meets in Naivasha, are they likely to come with a revised timeline? Part of why I ask this is, while the 60 days is cast in stone, the October 17th isn't. So the October 17th could still be a discussion, in which case I appreciate that we are discussing this, but let's be alive to the fact that this may not be the final timeline that IEBC will produce, knowing the circumstances in which it came out.
I think the activities are the activities won't change. The activities are basically the same.
Just the timeline.
Yeah, it's only the timeline. So
Sure.
maybe something was 6 days, it might change to 4 days. If something was 10 days, it might change to 8 days. I mean, but I don't think the activities will change at all. And we'll see when I run up to the election, they kept on making that change, and they can put, even the election timeline, they can decide to do a corrigenda in the Kenya Gazette, you know, after discussions with, because remember when you said, yes, you're right, stakeholders have to discuss it, and they might sit together with the political parties, but also sit with the Ministry of Education, because they use the schools.
But was it premature for IEBC to make this or declare that particular date? Because it seems they've declared a date, they don't have the timelines in place as yet, they've not done a lot, then we have a date, now they're working backwards.
No, I think you can almost estimate how many days you need to run a presidential election. Because remember, they're not procuring the booths anymore, so it's very few things that they need to procure. And then you're looking at it's the ballot papers, you're just printing presidential ballot papers, which means it's much easier. And that brings us to the issue of printing and packaging, which is a major issue in the timeline. And in fact, this is where, again, so that we don't have the problem that we had, that political parties should make sure that they participate in that. The way, as the court had said last time, they make sure they know, and I would advise that even political parties should actually send their representative to the printing plant, because during printing, what is really important is the packaging. It's not the printing, it's the packaging, because the distribution is done according to the packaging, so that you can know in advance from the time they leave the printing plant how many ballot papers are going right to the polling stations, because they are packaged right to the polling station at the printing plant, so that you have the packaging list and distribution, because I think that's a way of also holding IEBC to account, because we have said all of us have to be vigilant.
Right, thank you.
So,
Farah, you have a question?
Yeah. No, Gladys, I understand the way you're coming from, and I respect all these brilliant ideas you have. But let me tell you exactly, those of you who come from strongholds, Those who come from Rift Valley, they know invariably it's somebody from Jubilee who will be there. Those who come from Nyanza, invariably it's somebody in Asa who is going to be there. Those of us who come from the battlegrounds, the way you are saying things right now is, tantamount to the girl who said, why should people complain that there's no bread? Why can't they eat cake? You know what I mean? When the whole structure, the whole system is designed in advance, from the CID officers, you know what I mean, to the security, to the provincial administration, to the police, police, and everybody is already put in place.
So what can we do about it?
I mean, it's impossible. The way it is right now, sometimes I even think maybe we should go back to the system we had when Kenyatta was there. When Kenyatta was there, the first Kenyatta, as long as you don't have a problem with it, sit there, you don't try and run for the presidency. He allowed everything else to be free and fair. Any election that was done under his moment, other than denying the KPU guys from running for elections. But then, even if you're a minister and you're very close to him and the people reject you on the ground, he used to tell you, okay, if they reject you, it's
but
up
what
to
can
you.
we do about that?
But
How do we
right
counter
now,
that?
because we came up with a multi-party system where the president has to depend on an MCA who is there on the ground, and then the president, all the way from up there to the lowest down here, there's a conspiracy. Yes. We have a system. These people, Jubilee had the instruments of government, and they used it to the full extent. In Eastern Province, there were elections. The provincial administration played havoc. The system was all changed. Say the officers, senior officers who are Luo, who are Luya, who were Kisi, who were removed. And they replaced them with the two very, the communities we know. Right. And see, there you are. Your people are arrested a day before that. They are arrested in the election itself. They are arrested when the agents from inside there.
Thank you.
So when the whole system, when the NIS is there, the CID is there, the police is there, provincial administration is there, the IEBC is compromised and it belongs to the system, then there can never be any election.
Can I suggest what can be done in terms of solution? Yeah. I think in the timelines, there is the provision for regulations being reviewed. I think because there is so much distrust, we need to be, as ordinarily it's not good to be very prescriptive, but I think in these circumstances we need to. In fact, and let me emphasize the point of process, the process flow and process management. For the time being, it said once the Form 34A is signed, is written, drawn, and maybe even countersigned by the agents, that it's entered into the system and transmitted. Nothing says, who knows that what is in the Form 34A is actually what's keyed in. Currently, there's no requirement. The presiding officer can do that on his own or her own. So let's be prescriptive. The Parliament has an opportunity to look at these revised regulations, all these problems that our friends are talking about. And with due respect, I'm surprised.
Can also put it in their guidelines.
I'm surprised that in Nyanza, the problem could be with NASA agents being locked out, because ordinarily the people power is such that it's Jubilee agents who would be locked out and NASA agents locked out in Central. That's the norm. But again, if there are certain guidelines, let's be prescriptive. What the police are able to do, what can they not do, and so on and so forth.
Thank you.
In the revised law.
Mheshimiwa, can I just give you just complete
on
also
on
your presentation?
I'm on the last
Very
one.
briefly on the last one.
On the last one is, and I think that's where one is the regulations you've said, and then there's also going to be these timelines for the upgrade and configuration of the KIM system. And I think that's where we come in, because that's where we had the biggest complaints. So now we don't have to wait until we have a petition to say where are the systems, how does it work, etc. They are going to be upgraded. They're all going to be redeployed back to headquarters. I think we should also participate in that process.
But can I just raise an issue? Remember, the contention in the Supreme Court case were three things: KIAMS, transmission of Forms 34A,
yes,
and the servers.
Yes.
Okay? Now, in cleaning up things so that we have an election in which all parties have confidence, you say that KIAMS will be brought, people want to look at it. The issue of how, what Shem is saying, how the Form 34As, whatever you call them now, but I believe they remain 34As, will be transmitted. That whole thing must be ascertained to the satisfaction of all parties. Thirdly, the servers were supposed to be opened with the technical teams from both parties to ensure that the servers that were used to bangle the elections are not the same servers, nor are they going to be used in the same way. And fourthly, which is very important, A court ruled that the printing firm, Al-Ghurair, should not be used for printing ballot papers. The IEBC went against that. They actually disobeyed a court order, and still went ahead and printed ballot papers from that particular firm. That issue has been raised, and it looks as if the IEBC is still refusing to use a different firm. My suggestion would be that the parties concerned should get together with the IEBC and agree all together where and who is going to print the ballot papers, so that this Al-Ghurair business does not again pollute the waters.
I thought the Al-Ghurair issue was resolved by the court.
Could I assist
The court settled that.
Could I assist on the technology aspects, because those are key issues?
All right. Before we come, I want Gladys to actually complete on the presentation.
So there are two main
activities,
which I think, which is the printing of the ballot papers and the upgrade of the KIM system being reconfigured and then distributed back to the field. Again, because they will be out here and they would normally be taken to Bomas or some big place where it's almost like a hall where everyone is. I think that's where the political parties can be involved, because you're allowed to say, and each of your agents can, a few of your agents can be there, and they can be shown and told exactly what the KIM system does. It identifies voters, it traces the flow of the voters, and then we make sure that the results of how many people have voted, the flow of voters, is not only communicated to Bomas, but also communicated to the constituency level for people to be able to see it. Then that way we can check the system at every stage, which leaves no room for anyone to manipulate anything.
Thank you.
So that we are not suspicious.
So we're expecting from your board's simplicity, accuracy, accountability, transparency.
And transparency, I've said that let's open up the tallying center so that everybody, and at the constituency level, and then also the recruitment of the officials, and we can do that. And then when it comes to verifying, we should make sure that our agents are properly trained to be able to ask the right questions. And we say this time it's going to be easy, because we can have the results or the flow of voters to be communicated directly from the polling station to the constituency. So I think we should focus this time on the constituencies as opposed to Bomas.
Right, thank you. Gladys, thank you very much for that presentation. Let's come to Governor Muthomi Njuki.
On both,
very briefly, yes.
Thank you.
Concentrate on both.
Thank you, Debarl. I've looked at the whole of this process, and I am left wondering, because we have too much suspicions in every level. We want our own in every level. And I remember, I have to quote that famous English saying that says, too many cooks spoil the broth. Because we have to have a level of trust in the systems that we have in place. When Shem Ochuodho says that Parliament should be able to have regulations within the very short time, we have 35 days only remaining. And
but also IEBC can gazette some regulations.
Shem, that we already have a bone of contention on whether Parliament should be convened or not. I had NASA say yesterday that the President has no powers. I don't know what constitution they read, because according to Article 34, it tabulates, Article 134, it tabulates the function that the President is not able to do in between the declaration of results and then the next elections. We still have a president in place. It does not mean that we have a vacuum. But there are those functions that he cannot be able to perform. And of course, one of them does not include not addressing and reconvening Parliament. So that is misleading Kenyans. That it is still possible for President to be able to reconvene Parliament and be able to address them, because it is there in the law. But however, in the issue of appointing judges, appointing officials, even to the extent of even trying to reconstitute IEBC, it is not possible, because the law does not allow us to have that at the moment. So we have to do with what is in place, and only 35 days, and we cannot be able to go beyond that.
Thank you. Let's hear from Shem. Upgrade, configuration, and deployment of KIMs.
I just wanted to say it would be unfortunate to gloss over the technology part, Debarl, because that's at the heart of this matter. One thing that is important to note, much of the information about technology complaints actually didn't come out of court yet. In fact, I'm left wondering, the Chebukati Chiloba memo, did Chebukati have some insights, some dialogue, conversation with some people in court, because he raises important issues. One of them, he raises, for example, there were satellite phones that were procured, which would have been used where the G3, G4 was not available. He was asking how come they were not used. You know, this didn't come out from the court process. There is also the talk of the systems which had GPSs. The global positioning system does indicate where exactly a system, a unit is. And it had got also what we call geofencing. The geofencing kind of restricts within an area within which that system is, so that if the system goes beyond that, it triggers an alarm. Yes. It seems from Chebukati Chiloba letter, he was asking who switched off those GPS facilities and so on. So these are information that didn't come out of the court. But if they were true, clearly the aspect of technology, and again, maybe for the information of Professor Nyong'o here, the law also says the technology system has to be procured at least 120 days before the election. So, and again, to also just give a comfort, it doesn't have to be the physical servers being changed. Software could be changed without necessarily the same servers. Right. And I keep saying that the problem is not the technology.
Thank you. We stop for time. We need to wind up with this. But I think the probing question will be, again, that if we expect to be, as we have it from the board there, accountability and transparency. Right now, we know that according to the judgment of the courts, that IEBC has refused to allow access, to the servers. First of all, if you're going to upgrade, what are we upgrading for?
Let us tell us about that.
Yes, actually, if we know that the system, or someone gammed the system,
Debarl,
what are we upgrading for?
With due respect to the Supreme Court, accessing servers, there are matters that have security implications. There needs to be a process, a procedure, and this is why I insist on certain things still going to be approved by Parliament. And by the way, whereas ordinary regulations, what are called, can be done through gazette notices, election regulations is very clear in the law, must go through Parliament. But I do agree with my sister, there can be guidelines which IEBC could gazette with, but they are not they are not legally binding, and they are not part of the regulations which go through Parliament. So there is enough time. But in terms of the safety measure, I think in this regard is the technical committee. Unfortunately, in the electoral revised law, there was a technical committee which I think a court did annul. I think we have to find a mechanism to reinstate that technical committee. I'm happy that the chairman was inviting Jubilee and NASA to send technical representatives.
Thank you.
But whatever they look at cannot be made. I think we would be compromising our national security too much.
Thank you. We need to wind up on this. My director is kicking me out. Professor, I'll be unjust today. Allow me to be unjust today to wind up on this because we're really strapped for time. I know this is a topic that we need much more time to actually thrash the matters out, but nonetheless, I want to thank you also for coming through, and Gladys also for making that presentation and looking at the timelines. This is what we are going to be looking at as we're moving forward towards October the 17th. Thank you very much for your valued company. I'm Debarl Inea. Thank you for sharing your morning.